A stranger walked up to me in a coffee shop and asked if I was the guy from Marcus Hale's book. I had no idea Marcus had written a book. Let me back up. Marcus and I met the first week of freshman year at Caldwell University, September 2006. He was 3 doors down in the dorm, and he knocked on my door to borrow a phone charger because his had snapped in transit. I lent him mine, and we talked until 2 in the morning about music, our hometowns, the fact that neither of us had any idea what we were doing with our lives. He was from a small town in rural Ohio. I was from the outskirts of Pittsburgh. We were both the first in our families to go to a 4-year university. That mattered. It felt like we were the same kind of lost. By October, we were inseparable. Every meal together. Same library table, same pretense of studying. We took 3 classes together sophomore year just to have an excuse to see each other every day, which was unnecessary because we already spent every single day together anyway. Marcus was at my father's funeral in 2011. I was 23, my dad died of a heart attack on a random Wednesday, and Marcus drove 6 hours from the city where he was already working his first job just to stand next to me at the graveside. He didn't ask if I needed him. He just showed up. That was the kind of friend he was, or the kind I thought he was. He was my best man in 2015 when I married my wife Dana. He gave a speech that made half the room cry and the other half laugh. He mentioned the phone charger. He said I was the brother he chose. Dana loved Marcus. My whole family loved Marcus. My mother called him her second son and meant it. Over 16 years, Marcus was there for everything. The bad job, the worst job, the miscarriage Dana and I went through in 2018 that we didn't tell almost anyone about. The DUI I got in 2013 that I'm still ashamed of. The period in 2017 when my anxiety got so bad I took 2 months of medical leave from work. The money problems in 2019 when we almost lost our house, $34,000 in back payments and penalties, a number I told Marcus because I needed someone to talk to. Marcus knew all of it. That's what happens when someone is your best friend for 16 years. You hand them the worst parts of yourself because you trust them completely. I handed Marcus everything, and Marcus wrote it all down. But I didn't know that yet. The first crack I can point to now is a dinner at his apartment back in January of last year, just the 2 of us. I was telling him about some conflict with my manager at work, nothing major, just office stuff, and Marcus asked a question that felt slightly off. He said, "What would you say your biggest professional failure has been, the one you actually feel bad about?" I thought it was a weird conversational turn, but I answered honestly because that's what I always did with Marcus. I told him about a project I'd tanked in 2016 by missing a deadline because I was drinking too much that month. A low point I'd only ever told Dana and Marcus. While I was talking, Marcus pulled out his phone and started typing. I noticed it. I said, "What are you doing?" He said he was making a grocery list. I believed him. The second thing was a text from a mutual friend named Phil Decker, someone Marcus and I had both known since college. Phil reached out in March and said Marcus had been asking him a lot of questions about me, old stories, things we'd all done together. Phil figured it was for something fun. I asked Marcus about it directly. He said he kept a journal and sometimes checked with friends on shared memories because he had a bad long-term memory. I let it go. I should not have let it go. The third thing was a missed call. Unknown number, 614 area code, twice in April. No voicemail. I forgot about it within an hour. I found out later that was a fact-checker from a publishing house. So, the coffee shop. This was a Tuesday morning in late May. I was at a place called Riverfront Grounds 2 blocks from my office, waiting for my oat milk latte. Dana got me into them when a woman, maybe 30, tote bag, glasses, came up and said she was reading a memoir called The Inland Sea by Marcus Hale. She said there was a character named Daniel in it who sounded a lot like me. She described a few details: a friend from Pittsburgh, a DUI, a miscarriage, a period of anxiety. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grab the counter. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about and got out of there. I sat in my car for 12 minutes. Then I searched the Inland Sea Marcus Hale memoir on my phone. It was real, published 6 weeks earlier by a small but well-regarded literary press. Marcus's author photo right there on the page. The description said it was a raw, unflinching account of male friendship, ambition, and the secrets we keep from the people closest to us. 2 major outlets had already given it glowing reviews. A second printing was already confirmed. I bought the ebook immediately and sat in that parking garage and read for 2 hours straight. I was late to a meeting and did not care. My name in the book was Daniel. My hometown was changed from Pittsburgh to a Rust Belt suburb of Cleveland. But the DUI was there in full detail, including the exact words the officer had said to me, words I had only ever repeated to Marcus. The miscarriage was there. Dana was called Sarah. The 2 months of medical leave were spread across 12 pages, including specific things I had said to Marcus in private about what I was going through. My father's death was there, including things I had told Marcus in grief that I had never said out loud to another human being. The near foreclosure was there, with the specific dollar figure, $34,000, that I had given him in confidence. The names were changed, but barely. Daniel, who grew up near Pittsburgh, met Marcus in a dorm in Ohio and was his best man at a wedding. Anyone who knew either of us would clock it in 10 seconds. I went home that night and told Dana. She read the relevant sections while I sat at the kitchen table. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He put the miscarriage in. He put our miscarriage in." That was the moment I stopped feeling shocked and started feeling something else entirely. I spent the next 3 days building a case. I ordered the physical book, went through it line by line with a highlighter, and documented every incident drawn from real life. I ended up with a list of 31 separate incidents or personal disclosures I could directly trace back to things I had told Marcus in confidence. 31. I emailed Phil and asked what exactly Marcus had asked him. Phil dug through his messages and found a voice memo Marcus had sent him in February, asking Phil to describe from his own perspective what was going on with me when my dad died. Marcus had called it a personal essay. Phil had no idea it was going into a published book. I also went back through my own text history with Marcus from the past 18 months. There were at least 6 separate conversations where he had asked me probing questions about specific events from my past, always framed as catching up or reminiscing. I had answered every single one honestly. I screenshotted every exchange. I called my cousin Terrence, who works as a paralegal, and he walked me through what I was looking at. The name changes complicated a defamation case. He told me to talk to an actual attorney. I made the appointment. On day 4, I called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring, voice totally normal, warm like always. "Hey man, what's up?" I said, "I read your book." 4 seconds of silence, then, "Oh." I asked him to explain Daniel. He said, "It's a composite character. All memoir does that." He tried to tell me that Daniel was a blend of multiple people, that emotional truth mattered more than factual accuracy in literary memoir. I read him the paragraph about the miscarriage, verbatim, including the detail about it being at 11 weeks and how Dana had held my hand in the car on the way home from the hospital because I was the one who couldn't stop crying. He went quiet. Then he tried a different angle. He said he genuinely hadn't thought anyone would connect it to me. I told him 3 of our mutual friends had already texted me asking if I knew about the book. He said, "They recognized you?" I said, "Instantly." More silence. Then the mask slipped. He said, "Ryan, I've been trying to get published for 8 years. This book is the first real thing I've done. Fiction wasn't landing. I needed the real material." He said it almost irritably, like I was the one being difficult. I said, "You used my miscarriage, my DUI, my medical history, my father's death, without asking me once." He said, "You would have said no." That was the whole answer right there. He knew exactly what he was doing. He did it anyway because he knew I would have said no. I hung up without saying goodbye. 2 days later, I was sitting in the office of an attorney named Claire Nguyen. She was thorough. She said the legal path was possible, but put the odds of a successful lawsuit at around 40% given the name changes and the public concern standards courts apply to memoir. She also said that even if I won, the process would be long and expensive and would require me to publicly identify myself as Daniel, which would spread the information further than it had already gone. She said legal action was my right, but I needed to understand what it would cost. I paid her $300 for the consultation and drove home to think. Meanwhile, the fallout had started without me. A woman named Jess, one of the core group from college, someone I'd known as long as I'd known Marcus, had read the book when it came out because Marcus had emailed her a copy. She had already figured out that Daniel was me, and she had said nothing. When I texted her, she told me she'd been in a complicated position. I asked her directly, "Did Marcus tell you he hadn't cleared this with me?" She went quiet. Then she admitted that Marcus had told her I was going to be upset, but that it was important for his career, and he hoped I'd understand eventually. She knew he hadn't asked me. She knew for 3 weeks, and she said nothing. That stung almost as bad as Marcus. Phil, on the other hand, was furious. He sent me a 4-minute voice message that was mostly him repeating, "What is wrong with him?" He called Marcus directly and told him he was a coward. Marcus texted me afterward saying Phil was overreacting and that emotions were running high. A guy named Derek, who Marcus and I had both known since sophomore year, texted me to say the book was really powerful, actually, and that I should try to see it as a tribute to your friendship. I read that text 3 times. Then I blocked Derek. Our friend group had a chat called Caldwell OGs, 11 people, everyone from those college years. The morning after my call with Marcus, he posted in the chat saying he knew some people had questions and that he wanted to be open. He said the book was literary nonfiction, that characters were inspired by real people, that he hoped everyone would read it in the spirit it was intended. 6 of the 11 immediately replied with hearts and "so proud of you." Phil wrote, "Does Ryan know about this, Marcus?" Marcus said, "Ryan and I have spoken," which was technically true. I had been reading all of it without saying a word. Then I posted one message. I said, "To clarify, Marcus did not ask my permission to use private conversations about my miscarriage, my DUI, my medical leave, or my father's death. He told me he knew I would have said no. I found out about this book from a stranger." The chat went silent for 11 minutes. Then it exploded. 3 people came to my defense immediately: Phil, a woman named Kezia who I'd always been close with, and a guy named Troy I hadn't talked to in 2 years but who apparently had strong feelings about consent and privacy. Kezia told Marcus directly, "You put his wife's miscarriage in a published book without asking. There's no artistic justification for that." Marcus replied that she didn't understand how Memoir worked. Kezia said she had a master's degree in English literature, and she understood exactly how Memoir worked. That was a good moment. Jess posted that we should all take a breath, that these were 2 people she loved, like it was a mutual conflict between equals, like I was also guilty of something. Marcus's response to my post was long. He said I was making this about permission and legality when it was really about art and honesty. He said our friendship had been the most formative relationship of his life. He said he had written about me with love. He said the book was, in many ways, a celebration of who I was. I posted one more line: "You put my wife's miscarriage in a book without asking her either." He did not respond to that. I left the chat, didn't make a scene about it, just muted notifications and stopped reading. Dana's reaction through all of this was calm in a way that unsettled me a little. She is a calm person by nature, but this was a different kind of calm. When I showed her Marcus's "I wrote about you with love" message, she read it once and said, "He loved having access to us." That was her complete verdict. I think she was right. My mom took a little longer to get there. She'd loved Marcus for 15 years and her first instinct was to look for a misunderstanding. I sat with her for 2 hours and walked her through everything: the phone charger, the 31 incidents, the "you would have said no" line. By the end, she was angry. She sent Marcus a text I only found out about later, telling him she was ashamed of him and wouldn't be in contact with him anymore. Marcus had called her mom for years. I don't know if he ever responded. I made my call on the lawsuit. I decided not to go forward with it, at least not then. Claire had been honest about the odds, and beyond the money and the time, I didn't want to spend 2 years publicly relitigating every private thing Marcus had put in that book. Some of that material was painful enough that I didn't want it in a courtroom. I emailed Claire, thanked her, and asked her to hold my file in case I changed my mind. Instead, I did something simpler. I wrote a factual account of what happened, no dramatics, just the timeline, the specific details, the "you would have said no" quote, and I posted it publicly on my social media. I tagged the publishing house. I tagged both outlets that had reviewed the book. I said I was the person Daniel was based on, that my wife and I had not been contacted or consulted, and that the miscarriage described in Chapter 7 was ours. 200 messages in the first 24 hours. Both reviewers reached out to me personally. One said she was disturbed by what I described and asked to follow up. The other published a short piece on the ethics of Memoir, didn't name Marcus directly, but it was obviously about the situation. The publishing house sent me a legal letter within a week. Terrence read it and said it had no actual teeth. I kept talking. Marcus's book sales slowed. Phil heard through someone in book distribution that the confirmed second printing got quietly scaled back. A literary festival that had booked Marcus for a panel on truth in Memoir pulled his name from the event. Kezia spotted it first, just gone from the website one day. Marcus texted me 4 more times over the following month. First text, he was sorry and wanted to talk. Second, he was consulting an attorney. Third, the book had been a mistake and he should have asked me. Fourth text was 3 words, I miss you. I didn't respond to any of them. Here is something I didn't expect going into all of this, the grief. Anger made sense and I had plenty of it, but the grief was different. 16 years, the phone charger, the graveside, standing up at my wedding, that person was real. Whatever Marcus did with this book, the guy who drove 6 hours to be next to me when my dad died was real. And I don't think I will ever fully make sense of how the same person could do both of those things. Phil and I got closer after everything. We started having lunch together every couple of weeks, just the two of us, which was new. We'd always been group friends rather than one-on-one. Phil turned out to be easy to talk to in a completely different way than Marcus had been, steadier. He said something that stuck with me. Marcus always needed an audience. Even when it was just us, he needed an audience. I'd never framed it that way, but once Phil said it, I couldn't unsee it. Kezia and I stayed close too. She and her husband had dinner with me and Dana in September. It was the first genuinely relaxed evening I'd had in months. No group chat politics, no one being careful. Just 4 people eating pasta and talking about normal things. Jess reached out in the fall with a long message saying she was sorry she hadn't told me about the book when she found out. She said she'd been trying not to get in the middle and that she understood now she'd made the wrong call. I read it twice. I didn't respond. Maybe someday, not yet. I ran into Marcus once, about 8 months after everything. Saturday morning at a hardware store, I was buying supplies to retile the bathroom. I turned down an aisle and he was there looking at paint samples. He looked up and saw me. Neither of us moved for a second. He said, "Hey." I said, "Hey," and kept walking. He didn't follow me or say anything else. I finished shopping, paid, and left. My hands were completely steady the whole time. I noticed that. A year out, I'm okay. Not in a I've learned so much and grown as a person way, just in a plain factual way. I go to work, I come home. Dana and I are solid. We took a trip to Portugal in the spring, something we'd been talking about for years and kept putting off, 12 days, just the two of us. It was exactly what we needed. The memoir is still out there. I can't do anything about that. People still occasionally find it and reach out, and I respond to most of them because I think the conversation about consent in memoir is worth having. Claire mentioned there's been some recent case law that might change the legal landscape if I ever decide to revisit that option. I'm not ruling it out. Marcus hasn't published anything else. I don't know what his life looks like now. Genuinely don't. A few weeks ago, Phil texted me on a random Thursday afternoon. Just 2 words, phone charger, a laughing emoji, a reference to the story Marcus had told at my wedding, the story that started all of it. I stared at that text for a while. I typed back, worst phone charger ever. Phil sent a heart. I sent one back. Then I put my phone down and went back to my day. That's where I am. That's where it ended. If a friend of 16 years did this to you, published your worst moments, your medical history, your grief, without asking once, what would you have done? Would you have taken it to court? Would you have responded to those texts? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know.